You step into the great hall as the sun dips below the jagged horizon. The stone walls around you are massive, cold, and unforgiving. As night falls, the warmth of the hearth begins to fade, and a bone-chilling dampness rises from the flagstones. You pull your wool cloak tighter, but the air still bites at your skin. Your breath comes in pale puffs of mist that vanish into the shadows of the high, timbered ceiling. Outside, winter wind howls through narrow arrow slits, sounding like a restless ghost. You look at the dark, cavernous space and wonder how anyone could possibly survive a night in this frozen monument of rock. To sleep here seems like an invitation to never wake up. Yet, generations of lords and servants managed to stay warm in the heart of winter. You are about to discover the ingenious secrets of medieval bedding and architecture. Imagine for a moment that you are standing in the center of a room where the air itself feels like a physical weight pressing against your skin. It is not just the temperature that strikes you, though a modern thermometer would surely tell a grim story of the mercury plummeting toward the freezing point. It is the sheer, inescapable quality of the cold. In a modern home, we think of cold as an absence of heat, something that can be pushed back with the flick of a thermostat or the sealing of a plastic window frame. But here, deep within the heart of a 13th century fortress during the peak of January, the cold is a presence. It is a living thing that has taken up residence within the very marrow of the building. You are currently standing in the Great Hall, the architectural centerpiece of the castle. To your left and right, the walls are not the thin, insulated partitions you are used to in the 21st century. They are massive, sprawling slabs of limestone and flint, some measuring 10 or 12 feet thick. On paper, these walls were designed for safety and to withstand the blunt force of a trebuchet stone or the persistent picking of a siege crew. But as you stand here, you begin to realize the trade-off. You are effectively standing inside a geological refrigerator. The first thing you notice as you try to settle in for the night is the smell. It is a heavy, earthy mixture of wood smoke, damp wool, and the faint metallic scent of wet stone. If you reach out and touch the wall, your hand does not meet a dry surface. Instead, your palm comes away slick with a thin film of moisture. This is the phenomenon of condensation on a massive scale. Because the stone is so thick, it possesses what architects call high thermal mass. During the brief, weak hours of winter sunlight, the stone never truly warms up. Instead, it holds onto the frigid temperatures of the previous night, radiating that chill inward even if a fire is roaring in the hearth. The moisture in the air, created by the breath of dozens of servants and the steam from the kitchens, hits that cold stone and clings to it, turning the walls into weeping faces of gray rock. Look up, and you see the second great enemy of warmth. The ceiling of the great hall vaulted high above you, disappearing into a web of dark timber beams. While this design was meant to impress visitors and provide a sense of regal space, it is a disaster for anyone trying to stay warm. You know from basic science that heat rises. Every bit of warmth generated by the central hearth or the wall fireplaces immediately drifts upward, far beyond your reach, leaving you to huddle in the stagnant, freezing air near the floor. The floor itself offers no comfort. You are likely standing on a foundation of packed earth or cold flagstones. To combat the chill, the servants have spread a thick layer of rushes, which are long, dried grasses mixed with fragrant herbs like lavender or meadowsweet. In theory, this acts as a primitive form of carpet. In practice, the bottom layers of these rushes often become damp and rot against the cold stone, creating a layer of insulation that feels more like treading on a frozen marsh than a living room floor. As you move through the castle toward your sleeping quarters, you begin to understand the true meaning of a draft. In a castle, air is always in motion. There is no such thing as a truly sealed room. You pass by an arrow slit, a narrow vertical opening designed for archers to defend the walls. There is no glass here. Perhaps there is a wooden shutter, or perhaps a piece of oil-soaked parchment stretched across a frame to let in a dull gray light. Neither can stop the wind. The winter gales of the northern latitudes whistle through these slits with a high-pitched keen, finding every gap in your clothing. Even the grandest doorways are often covered only by heavy wool tapestries. While these hangings are beautiful, depicting scenes of great hunts or biblical stories, they ripple and sway in the constant breeze that snakes through the corridors. You might wonder why they did not just build smaller rooms. The answer lies in the very nature of what a castle is. It is not a house. It is a machine for war and a statement of power. To build small, cozy rooms would be to admit a lack of status. A lord must have a hall large enough to feast his retainers, and that hall must be grand enough to dwarf the individuals within it. This grandiosity comes at a steep price. The larger the room, the more impossible it is to heat. Even with a fire large enough to roast an entire ox, the heat only extends a few feet from the flames. If you stand with your front to the fire, your chest might feel toasted, but your back will still be prickled by the frost of the open room. Now follow the winding spiral of the stone staircase up toward the solar. This is the private chamber of the Lord and Lady, and it is here that the battle against the cold becomes most desperate. The staircase itself is a wind tunnel. Because the castle is built with a series of towers and interconnecting walkways, the air pressure differences between the interior courtyards and the exterior walls create a natural chimney effect. Cold air is sucked in through the lower gates and pushed up through the stairwells, ensuring that even the highest rooms are subjected to a constant, chilling updraft. As you enter the solar, you see that the walls here are covered in wooden paneling, a luxury that the common soldiers in the barracks do not enjoy. This wainscoting provides a tiny buffer between you and the weeping limestone, but it is not enough to stop the radiant cold. You can feel it pulling the warmth from your body as if the stone were a sponge soaking up your very life force. You look toward the bed, which looks less like a place of rest and more like a fortified bunker of fabric. The medieval mind understood that they could not heat the room, so they focused entirely on heating the person. You realize that to survive a night in this icebox, you must change your entire perspective on what it means to go to sleep. In your modern life, you might wear thin pajamas and toss a light duvet over yourself in a room kept at a steady 70 degrees. Here, that would be a death sentence. To sleep in a castle is to prepare for an expedition. You watch as the servants prepare the space. They are not just laying out blankets. They are building a microclimate. Every layer of wool, every fur-lined cloak, and every heavy curtain drawn around the bedposts is a vital barrier against the creeping frost. You see the heavy oak shutters being bolted shut, cutting off the last view of the moonlit, snowy courtyard outside. The only light comes from a single flickering candle and the dying embers in the small wall fireplace, which is already losing its battle against the mountain of stone surrounding it. The silence of the castle at night is not a peaceful silence. It is a heavy, ringing quiet, broken only by the occasional crack of a timber cooling or the distant howl of the wind over the battlements. You realize that for the people living here, the castle was both a protector and an adversary. It kept out the Vikings, the rival lords, and the rebel armies, but it also invited in the relentless, soul-crushing cold of the earth itself. As you prepare to climb into the high, wooden frame of the bed, you feel a profound sense of isolation. You are a small, warm creature inside a vast, frozen monument of rock. The night ahead will be a test of endurance, and the secrets of how people manage to find comfort in this glacial environment are about to become very important to you. The icebox is closed for the night, and now you must learn how to thrive within it. You stand in the center of the bedchamber, and your first instinct is to reach out and touch the wall. But you hesitate. You already know what that stone feels like. It is not just cold. It is a predatory kind of cold. In a medieval castle, the stone walls are often 6 to 10 feet thick. They are massive, stoic, and incredibly dense. To you, they might look like a fortress of safety, but to your body heat, they are a sponge. This is a concept known as thermal mass. The stone wants to reach an equilibrium with the outside air, and in the dead of winter, that means the wall is effectively a block of ice that never melts. If you were to stand an inch away from that bare stone, you would feel the warmth being sucked right out of your skin through radiant heat loss. But as you turn around, you notice that the room does not feel as cavernous or as hostile as the corridor outside. The reason is hanging right in front of your eyes. Great, heavy sheets of woven story cover the walls from the ceiling down to the floor. We call them tapestries today, and we see them as precious works of art behind glass in museums. But for you, standing here in the flickering light of a tallow candle, these are not decorations. They are your primary line of defense. They are sophisticated pieces of thermal engineering. Look closely at the one nearest to you. It depicts a stag running through a forest of deep greens and indigo blues. You reach out and press your palm against the fabric. It is thick, heavy, and slightly coarse. Most of these hangings are made of wool, and for a very good reason. Wool is a miracle fiber in the medieval world. Each individual hair is crimped and coiled, creating millions of tiny pockets of air within the weave itself. Even when it gets slightly damp from the humidity of a winter storm, wool retains its ability to insulate. As you run your fingers over the threads, you realize there is a gap between the tapestry and the stone wall behind it. This is the secret. The tapestry is not nailed flat against the rock. Instead, it is hung from wooden rods or iron hooks, allowing it to dangle a few inches away from the masonry. This creates a pocket of dead air. In the world of insulation, dead air is everything. Because that air is trapped between the heavy wool and the cold stone, it does not circulate. It becomes a buffer zone. The stone wall can stay as cold as it wants, but that chill has to fight its way through the stagnant air and then through the dense, lanolin-rich wool before it can reach you. You move closer to the corner of the room, and you notice how the tapestries overlap. They act like a heavy coat for the room itself. Without them, the stone walls would radiate a constant, numbing chill that would make it impossible to sleep, no matter how many blankets you piled on your bed. But with these radiant barriers in place, the heat from the fireplace in the center of the room or the small brazier by your feet actually has a chance. The wool reflects some of that heat back toward you, rather than letting the stone swallow it whole. Think about the sheer scale of the labor you are looking at. You are standing in a room lined with thousands of hours of human life. To create just one of these hangings, teams of weavers worked for years on massive upright looms. They used natural dyes made from plants like madder for red, woad for blue, and weld for yellow. Because the wool is so dense, a single large tapestry could weigh as much as a grown man. When you move, you can see the fabric sway slightly in the drafts that inevitably snake through the chamber. It looks like the forest in the picture is breathing. This movement is actually another part of the tapestry's job. In a castle, the windows are rarely perfectly sealed. Even with wooden shutters and heavy curtains, the wind finds a way in. These tapestries act as draft excluders on a grand scale. They break the flow of the air, preventing a freezing gust from cutting across the room and hitting you while you sleep. They turn a sharp wind into a dull, harmless murmur. As you stand there, you notice something else. The room is incredibly quiet. The outside world, with its howling winds and the distant clatter of guards in the courtyard, feels miles away. The tapestries are not just insulating you from the cold, they are insulating you from sound. In a world of hard stone and wooden floors, every noise echoes and bounces, creating a harsh, chaotic environment. But the wool swallows the sound. It creates a hushed, intimate atmosphere that is essential for rest. It transforms a hollow stone box into a soft, muffled cocoon. You walk toward the bed, and you see that the tapestries have been arranged to create a specific zone of warmth. The bed is often placed in a corner where two of these hangings meet. In some of the grandest castles, they might even hang additional fabrics from the ceiling to create a sort of inner tent within the room. This is the room within a room concept. You are not trying to heat the entire vaulted chamber. That would be impossible. You are trying to create a small, manageable microclimate where your own body heat and a small source of fire can actually make a difference. Imagine the visual impact as well. In the middle of a bleak, gray winter, when the world outside is nothing but brown mud and white snow, these tapestries bring the colors of summer indoors. You see vibrant gardens, golden wheat fields, and bright red flowers. Psychologically, this matters. Warm colors like red and gold make you feel warmer. The imagery of a sun-drenched hunt or a lush forest helps to stave off the crushing gloom of the long northern nights. You are not just physically protected, you are mentally transported away from the ice. But there is a trade-off for this comfort. You lean in and take a deep breath near the fabric. There is a very specific scent to a medieval bedchamber. It is the smell of old wool, with smoke and a hint of dampness. Because these tapestries are so heavy and so permanent, they are magnets for dust and soot from the torches and fires. They can become home to moths and spiders. Every few months, the servants have to take them down, a task that requires several strong people, and haul them outside to be beaten with sticks to knock out the accumulated grime of months of winter living. Despite the dust, you realize that without these hangings, the castle would be practically uninhabitable for several months of the year. They are the reason the nobility can survive in these towering monuments of stone. They are a display of immense wealth, yes, but they are born out of a desperate, practical need for survival. A lord might spend a fortune on a tapestry not just because it looks beautiful, but because it is the only thing standing between his family and a slow, shivering death by hypothermia. You turn your back to the wall and look toward the center of the room. The fire is burning low now, and the shadows of the woven hunters and animals dance across the floor. You realize that the castle is not just a building. It is a series of layers. The stone is the outer shell, the tapestries are the skin, and the bed, which you will soon climb into, is the heart. Every layer is designed to trap a little more of that precious heat, to hold on to it with everything it has. As you prepare to move deeper into the room, you feel a renewed respect for the weavers and the engineers of the past. They understood the physics of their world perfectly. They knew that to beat the cold, you could not just fight it with fire. You had to trap it, trick it, and muffle it. You had to wrap your world in wool. The tapestries are not just art. They are the invisible blankets that make the stone bearable. They are the radiant barriers that turn a frozen fortress into a home. You take one last look at the stag in the weave, and you can almost feel the warmth of the phantom sun in the picture, a testament to the power of human ingenuity against the biting teeth of winter. You turn away from the flickering shadows of the great hall, leaving behind the smell of roasting meat and the low murmur of servants finding their spots on the floorboards. Your destination lies upward, far above the damp, salt-stained flagstones of the lower levels. You begin to climb a narrow, winding spiral staircase. Your hand brushes against the cold limestone wall, and you can feel the chill of the earth itself vibrating through the stone. But as you ascend, the air begins to change. The heavy, stagnant dampness of the ground floor begins to thin, replaced by a slight, persistent breeze that smells of wood smoke and dried lavender. You have reached the upper stories of the keep, and as you push open a heavy oak door, you step into a space that feels entirely different from the rest of the fortress. This is the solar. The name itself suggests its purpose. In the Latin tongue, it relates to the sun, and in the French, it speaks of solitude. This is the private sanctuary of the Lord and Lady, a room designed specifically to capture every possible ounce of warmth and light that the harsh medieval winter might offer. Take a moment to look around this room through the dim light of your tallow candle. Unlike the great hall below, which is a cavernous space designed to impress and intimidate, the solar is intimate. The ceiling is lower, trapping the rising heat. The walls, though still thick enough to withstand a siege, are often lined with wooden paneling. Imagine the difference that wood makes. While the stone walls of the lower levels act like a giant block of ice, drawing the heat out of your body, these oak panels create a layer of insulation. They feel warmer to the touch. They soften the echoes of the wind howling outside the battlements. In the dead of winter, the solar becomes more than just a bedroom. It is the heart of the castle's survival strategy. When the frost thickens on the outer walls and the great hall becomes a drafty tunnel of ice, the noble family performs a seasonal migration. They move their entire lives into this single elevated room. This is where they eat, where they conduct business, where they pray, and where they sleep. It is a psychological shift as much as a physical one. By shrinking their world down to this one well-heated chamber, they create a fortress within a fortress against the cold. Your eyes are drawn to the windows. In the great hall, windows are often nothing more than narrow slits, designed for archers rather than for light. But here in the solar, the windows are larger. They are positioned specifically to face the south or the southwest. During the brief hours of the winter day, the low-hanging sun pours through these openings. Even if the air outside is freezing, the direct radiation of the sun heats the floor and the furniture. You can imagine the lady of the castle sitting in the window nook, her hands busy with needlework, soaking up the rare golden light like a lizard on a warm stone. If the castle is particularly wealthy, these windows might even be filled with glass. This is a staggering luxury for the time. In an era where most people make do with shutters of wood or translucent pieces of horn or oiled linen, glass is a miracle. It allows the light to enter while keeping the biting wind firmly on the outside. You walk over to the window and press your hand against the pane. It is cold, yes, but the mere sight of the winter landscape without feeling the gale on your face is a comfort that few in the medieval world can claim. But the real magic of the solar, the thing that makes it a true refuge, is the fireplace. Unlike the central hearth in the great hall, which lets most of its heat escape through a hole in the roof, the fireplace in the solar is built into the wall. It has a chimney. This might seem like a simple invention to you, but in the Middle Ages, the wall fireplace was a technological revolution. It allowed for multiple stories of a building to be heated independently. Because the fire is tucked into a stone alcove, it radiates heat forward into the room. The back of the fireplace, often lined with a heavy iron plate, absorbs the heat and stays warm long after the flames have died down. You move closer to the hearth. The smell of burning oak is thick and sweet. The heat hits your face, and for the first time since you entered the castle, you feel the tension leave your shoulders. In this room, the cold is not an invincible enemy. It is a neighbor kept strictly at the door. Now look toward the center of the room. Here stands the most important piece of furniture in the entire castle: the great bed. In the modern world, we think of a bed as a piece of furniture you put in a room. In a medieval solar, the bed is a room in and of itself. It is a massive structure of carved wood, often with 4 thick posts supporting a heavy wooden canopy or a frame draped with thick wool curtains. As you approach the bed, you see that the curtains are currently drawn shut. This is not just for privacy. These curtains are the final line of defense against the winter. When you climb into this bed and pull the heavy fabric closed, you are creating a tiny, insulated microclimate. Your own body heat, along with the heat of anyone sleeping beside you, is trapped within that small square of space. Outside the curtains, the temperature in the solar might drop as the fire turns to embers, but inside the bed, it remains cozy and warm. You reach out and touch the bedding. There are layers upon layers here. At the bottom is a thick straw mattress to provide height and a bit of spring. On top of that is a feather mattress, a luxurious cloud of down that molds to your body. Then come the sheets, perhaps made of fine linen if the Lord is wealthy, followed by heavy woolen blankets. And finally, the top layer is a coverlet made of fur. You can feel the weight of it in your hands. It might be the pelts of dozens of squirrels, or perhaps a thick rug of bear or wolf fur. This weight is comforting. It pins you down, keeping you still and warm through the long, dark hours of the night. Think about the social shift this room represents. Below, in the hall, life is communal and loud. Up here, it is quiet and exclusionary. The migration to the solar is a move toward privacy, a concept that was still evolving in the medieval mind. By choosing the warmest room, the nobles were also choosing to separate themselves from their subjects. The warmth of the solar is a mark of status. It is a privilege bought with stone and timber and expensive fuel. As you stand in the center of the room, you realize that the solar is also a place of scent and sound. Because the windows and doors are tightly sealed, the smells of the room linger. You smell the beeswax of the candles, the aromatic herbs like rue or meadowsweet strewn among the rushes on the floor to keep away pests, and the faint, underlying scent of the fur bedding. The sounds are muffled here. You don't hear the clatter of the kitchens or the baying of the hounds in the courtyard. You only hear the rhythmic whistle of the wind through the battlements and the occasional pop of a log in the fireplace. This is how the medieval elite survived the freezing nights. They didn't try to heat the whole castle. They knew that was impossible. Instead, they retreated. They retreated from the hall to the solar, from the solar to the bed, and from the bed to the space beneath the furs. It was a life of concentric circles, each one smaller and warmer than the last. You can almost feel the relief of the Lord as he unbuckles his heavy cloak and prepares to disappear into the soft, warm depths of his curtained sanctuary. The solar was more than just a room. It was a testament to the fact that even in an age of stone and iron, humans could find a way to create a soft, bright world. It was a place where the sun was invited in and the winter was told to stay out. As you prepare to leave this room and descend back into the darkness of the stairwell, you take one last look at the orange glow of the hearth reflecting off the polished oak walls. You realize that the castle was not just a machine for war, but a machine for living. A complex system of stone and fire, designed to keep the spark of human warmth alive in the heart of the freezing wilderness. You turn the heavy iron handle of the door, and the cool air of the corridor greets you, but the memory of the solar's golden warmth stays with you, a lingering promise that the morning will eventually come. You move deeper into the private chambers of the castle, leaving the flickering shadows of the great hall behind. The air here is colder, a heavy, damp chill that seems to cling to your skin like a wet shroud. But in the center of the room stands a structure that looks less like a place to sleep and more like a fortress made of timber. It is the four-poster bed. You might think of it today as a decorative piece of furniture, a symbol of Victorian elegance or old-fashioned luxury. In the medieval world, however, this bed is a masterpiece of thermal engineering. It is a room within a room, a wooden cocoon designed to keep you alive and warm when the stone walls around you drop to temperatures that would freeze the water in your basin. You walk toward it, and the sheer scale of the thing becomes clear. It is massive, for thick pillars of carved oak rise from the floor, reaching toward the ceiling. They support a heavy wooden roof known as the tester. This is not just for show. Think about the ceiling above you. Even in the finest castles, stone dust, bits of mortar, or even a stray spider can fall from the rafters during the night. The tester provides a solid shield, but more importantly, it serves a critical role in heat management. As you breathe and as your body radiates heat, that warmth rises. In a normal room with a high ceiling, that heat is lost forever into the cold rafters. But here, the wooden roof of the bed catches it. It traps a pocket of air directly above your body, creating a warm layer that begins to reflect the heat back down toward you. You reach out and touch the wood. It is cold to the touch, but it is solid. Oak is a dense material, and while it takes a long time to warm up, it also acts as an insulator. It creates a physical barrier between you and the drafts that whistle through the arrow slits in the outer walls. Now look at the curtains. These are not the thin, lacy drapes you might see in a modern home. These are heavy, thick walls of wool or velvet. They are lined with secondary fabrics to make them even more airtight. They hang from iron rods or wooden tracks, and when you pull them shut, they overlap by several inches. This is the secret to the cocoon. You are no longer trying to heat a massive stone chamber. You are only trying to heat a small box of air that is roughly 6 feet long and 4 feet wide. By pulling those curtains tight, you create a microclimate. You seal out the moving air. In a medieval castle, the wind is your greatest enemy. It finds every crack, every gap in the masonry, and every poorly fitted door. By closing the bed curtains, you create a dead airspace where the wind cannot reach. You step closer and look at the base of the bed. You do not see a box spring or a metal frame. Instead, there is a complex lattice of heavy hemp ropes. They are woven through holes in the side rails of the bed, crossing back and forth to create a springy, resilient net. This keeps you off the cold floor. The floor of a castle is often stone covered in rushes, and the cold that radiates from the ground is relentless. By suspending the sleeper several feet in the air, the bed puts a buffer of air between the body and the frozen earth. You notice a wooden tool leaning against the wall, a heavy T-shaped wrench. This is used to tighten those ropes. Over time, the hemp stretches and the bed begins to sag. Every few days, a servant must come and crank the ropes tight again to ensure the sleeper remains elevated and supported. This is where the old saying, "Sleep tight," comes from. It is a literal instruction to ensure the bed is properly engineered for the night. If the ropes are loose, you will sag into a cold pocket. If they are tight, you stay elevated and warm. On top of these ropes, the layering begins. It is like an onion of insulation. First, There is a thick mat of woven rushes or straw to provide a flat surface. Then comes the ticking, a heavy canvas bag stuffed with straw or dried bracken. This is the base layer, providing the bulk and the first level of warmth. But the true luxury, the part that makes you sink into the bed, is the feather mattress. This is stuffed with the soft down of geese or ducks. It is a massive, fluffy cloud that conforms to your body, trapping even more air in the tiny spaces between the feathers. You imagine climbing into this. The bed is high, so you might need a small set of steps or a sturdy footstool to reach the top. As you crawl onto the feathers, you sink down, and the heavy wool blankets are pulled over you. These blankets are not like modern fleece. They are coarse, heavy, and very warm. They have a weight to them that feels like a protective embrace. But the engineering of the bed does not stop with the furniture. It includes the occupants. In the medieval world, sleeping alone is a rare and cold luxury. In this wooden cocoon, you would likely not be alone. You might share the space with your spouse, your children, or even a trusted servant or a favorite dog. Every living body in that bed acts as a radiator. Together, 4 or 5 people and perhaps a large hound can generate an enormous amount of heat. In that small, enclosed space, the temperature can rise significantly. While the air in the center of the room might be 40 degrees Fahrenheit, the air inside the curtains can climb to a comfortable 70 degrees. It is a biological furnace sheltered within a wooden shell. The curtains are the most vital part of this thermal machine. Imagine a fabric so thick that you cannot see light through it even when the sun is shining directly on the other side. This is often wool that has been boiled or felted to increase its density. It is heavy. To pull a single curtain closed requires a firm grip and a strong arm. As the fabric slides along the iron rod, it makes a metallic rasping sound that echoes in the quiet room. You pull the 4 curtains until they meet at the corners. You make sure they overlap. Any gap, no matter how small, would allow a jet of freezing air to enter your sanctuary. This is the same principle used by modern hikers when they seal themselves into a high-quality sleeping bag. You are minimizing the volume of air that your body needs to heat. If you were to sleep in the open room, your body would try to heat thousands of cubic feet of air, a task that is physically impossible. But inside these curtains, you are only responsible for about 80 cubic feet. This is a manageable space. Within 20 minutes, the heat leaving your skin begins to bounce off the heavy wool and the wooden ceiling. The temperature inside the curtains begins to climb. Underneath you, the rope lattice is doing more than just holding you up. It is providing a flexible foundation that keeps the mattress from becoming a lumpy, cold mass on the floor. The tension is what keeps the various mattresses from sagging into the center. If the bed were to sag, the sleepers would all roll into the middle, creating a single point of pressure that would quickly become uncomfortable and cold. By keeping the ropes tight, the weight is distributed evenly, and the insulating layers of straw and feathers can remain lofted. Loft is the secret to warmth. It is the air trapped within the fibers of the wool and the down of the feathers that provides the insulation. If you compress those materials, you lose the air and you lose the warmth. The engineering of the rope bed ensures that the loft is preserved. You sit on the edge of the mattress, and you can feel the difference already. The curtains muffle the sounds of the castle. The howling wind outside the walls becomes a distant murmur. The crackle of the dying fire in the hearth is softened. You are in a world of your own. The engineering of the 4-poster bed transformed the terrifying cold of a northern winter into something manageable, even cozy. It allowed the nobility to survive in their stone towers without needing to keep a massive fire roaring all night long. which would have been a fire hazard and a waste of precious wood. Instead, they relied on physics. They used the principles of insulation, dead airspace, and thermal mass to create a sanctuary. You look at the intricate carvings on the pillars. There are lions, vines, and family crests. They tell a story of status, but they also serve to break up the surface area of the wood, perhaps helping to diffuse the air. Every part of this structure has a purpose. Even the height of the bed is strategic. Smoke from the fireplace often lingers near the ceiling, but the cold, stale air settles on the floor. By sleeping at a height of 3 or 4 feet, the sleeper stays in the sweet spot where the air is clearest and the warmth from the embers is most likely to reach. You realize that this is not just a place to dream. It is a survival pod. Without it, the long nights of January would be a test of endurance that many would not survive. The 4-poster bed is the ultimate expression of medieval ingenuity, a way to reclaim comfort from a harsh and unforgiving environment. You pull one of the curtains closed, feeling the heavy fabric slide along the rod. The light from the room disappears, leaving you in a soft, warm darkness. The air is still. The cold is gone. You are safe inside the wooden cocoon, ready to face the long hours of the night in a sanctuary of your own making. You lie back, feeling the gentle give of the ropes and the overwhelming warmth of the down. The castle around you might be a frozen monument of stone, but here, inside the engineering marvel of the 4-poster bed, you are finally at peace. Reach out your hand and feel the weight of the fabric hanging just inches from your face. It is thick, heavy, and slightly coarse to the touch. This is not the sheer, decorative netting of a modern canopy. This is a wall. As you pull the final panel shut, the wooden rings slide across the iron rod with a sharp, rhythmic rasp that echoes through the cavernous chamber. Then silence. You have just completed the most important structural act of your evening. You have sealed the door to your personal sanctuary. In the modern world, we think of curtains as window dressings designed to block out the morning sun or keep the neighbors from peering in. But in a medieval castle, the curtains of a 4-poster bed were a sophisticated piece of climate control technology. They were the final line of defense against a winter that lived inside the walls. By drawing these heavy drapes, usually made of dense wool or plush velvet lined with linen, you are creating a room within a room. You are shrinking the volume of the universe you have to heat from 1,000 cubic feet of freezing stone hauled down to a few dozen cubic feet of air surrounding your own body. Take a deep breath and listen. Outside the curtains, the castle is alive with the sounds of a drafty fortress. You can hear the low, mournful howl of the wind as it squeezes through the narrow arrow slits in the outer walls. You can hear the occasional pop and hiss of a dying log in the great hearth across the room, a fire that is already losing its battle against the creeping frost. You might even hear the rhythmic footsteps of a guard on the wall walk outside your window. But inside the curtains, those sounds are muffled, softened into a distant hum. The fabric acts as a sound dampener, but more importantly, it acts as a thermal insulator. Close your eyes and imagine the air around you. When you first climbed into this bed, the air was just as biting as the air in the center of the room. It stung your lungs and made your skin crawl. But now something remarkable is happening. You are the only heat source in this tiny, enclosed wooden box, and your biology is going to work. Every human being is a biological furnace, radiating roughly 100 watts of heat at all times. In a vast stone chamber, that heat is instantly lost, sucked away by the massive, cold sinks of the granite walls and the high timber ceilings. But here, inside the curtains, that heat has nowhere to go. As you exhale, a plume of warm, moist air leaves your lungs. In the open room, you would see your breath as a white mist, a ghost of your own energy escaping into the void. But here, your breath begins to linger. It hits the heavy fabric of the curtains and bounces back. It fills the small gap between your body and the overhead tester. Slowly, degree by degree, the temperature inside the bed begins to rise. You are creating a microclimate. This is a phenomenon where the atmospheric conditions in a small, restricted area differ significantly from the area surrounding it. Outside the velvet, it might be 40 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to make your teeth chatter. But inside, through the simple accumulation of your own body heat and the trapped warmth of your breath, the temperature might climb into the 60s or even 70s. This is the secret to surviving a medieval winter. It was not about heating the castle. That was impossible. Even the most massive fireplace could only warm the few feet directly in front of the flames. Instead, the medieval mind focused on heating the person. By trapping a thin layer of air and keeping it still, you are utilizing the same principle that keeps a polar bear warm or makes a modern fiberglass insulation work. Still air is one of the best insulators in nature. The thick curtains prevent the cold drafts of the room from reaching you, and they prevent the warm air you have generated from escaping. As the minutes pass, you can feel the humidity rising. This is the breath part of the microclimate. In the dry, frigid air of a stone castle, your skin can become cracked and painful. But inside the curtained bed, the moisture from your respiration and your skin is trapped. The air becomes heavy and sweet, smelling of the lavender used to scent the linens and the faint, earthy scent of the wool curtains. It is a cocoon. For the first time since the sun went down, your muscles begin to truly relax. The tension in your shoulders, which you had been holding tight against the cold, finally melts away. Think about the sheer luxury of this enclosure. To a medieval person, this was the height of comfort. It was not just about the physical warmth, though that was a matter of life and death. It was about the psychological security of the barrier. In a world where privacy was almost non-existent, where servants might sleep on pallets at the foot of your bed and guards might pass through your chamber at any hour, these curtains were your only private world. Behind the velvet, you are invisible. You are in a space that is entirely yours. The thickness of the fabric is essential. If these were light silks, the heat would dissipate quickly. But the medieval elite used heavy wools, often embroidered with silver and gold thread, or deep piles of velvet that could weigh 50 pounds or more for a single set of hangings. This weight is what keeps the curtains from fluttering when a draft hits them. They hang like leaden shields, unmoving. If you were to reach out and touch the outside of the curtain, it would feel like ice. But the inside surface, the side facing you, is radiating a gentle warmth back toward your body. In this darkness, your senses sharpen. You become intensely aware of the movement of your own blood and the rhythm of your heart. You are no longer fighting the environment. You have conquered it using nothing more than fabric and your own metabolic fire. This microclimate is a delicate balance. If you were to open the curtains even a few inches to peek out, the heavy, cold air of the room would come rushing in like a tidal wave, displacing your hard-earned warmth in a matter of seconds. So you stay tucked in. You stay submerged in this pocket of stale, warm, humid air because it is the only thing keeping the winter at bay. As you drift toward sleep, consider the engineering of the bed itself once more. The wooden frame is not just for show. The high posts and the solid wooden roof or tester create a rigid skeleton that holds the curtains in a perfect rectangular box. This shape is efficient. It minimizes the surface area through which heat can escape while providing just enough room for you to move without touching the cold fabric. It is a masterpiece of passive heating. The contrast is what makes it so vivid. You know that just 3 feet away, on the other side of that velvet wall, a glass of water left on a side table might actually begin to grow a skin of ice before dawn. You know that the stone floor is cold enough to sear the skin of a bare foot. But here you are wrapped in a layer of your own making. Your breath, which was once a sign of your vulnerability in the cold, has become your heater. The very air you discard is what is saving you. You are now encased in a triple layer of protection. You have the heavy furs and wool blankets pressing down on you. You have the linen shift or the naked warmth of a bedfellow beside you. And finally, you have the velvet curtains holding it all together. This is the medieval solution to the problem of the stone fortress. They did not try to change the world outside. They simply built a smaller, better world that they could carry with them into the night. As your eyes grow heavy, you feel the gentle weight of the atmosphere you have created. It is thick and still. The world of the castle, with its politics, its wars, and its freezing winds, has faded away. There is only the soft sound of your own breathing and the knowledge that, for the next few hours, the cold cannot touch you. You have engineered a sanctuary of breath and fabric, and in the heart of a frozen monument, you have found a way to stay warm. The microclimate is stable. The curtains are drawn. The night is long. But here, inside your velvet box, the winter has finally lost its sting. If you were to step back into a castle during the height of winter, you would quickly realize that the modern luxury of a private bedroom is exactly that, a luxury. For the vast majority of people living within those stone walls, the concept of a solitary night spent in a room of one's own was not just rare, it was practically unheard of. More importantly, it was dangerous. In the medieval mind, privacy was a distant second to the very real, very pressing need for warmth. To sleep alone was to surrender your body to the leaching cold of the stones. To sleep together, however, was to tap into the most reliable furnace available in the Middle Ages, the heat of the human body. You find yourself standing at the edge of the great hall as the final embers of the central hearth begin to glow a dull, deep orange. The lords and ladies have retired to their chambers, but the castle does not go to sleep in silence. Instead, there is a rustle of movement all around you. This is the heart of the communal quilt. You watch as servants, guards, and visiting travelers begin to pull straw-filled pallets from beneath benches or simply drag heavy woolen cloaks onto the rushes covering the floor. There is no sense of embarrassment or intrusion. This is survival. You see men and women, soldiers and scullery maids, huddling together in groups of 3, 4, or even more. They are creating a living carpet of humanity, each person acting as a radiator for the next. Imagine the physical sensation of this arrangement. You are lying on a thick layer of straw that has been packed into a linen sack. It is prickly and smells faintly of dried fields and the dust of the day. To your left is a fellow traveler you met only hours ago at the evening meal. To your right is a young page whose job it was to carry wine to the high table. You are all fully dressed, wearing your tunics, your hose, and perhaps even your hoods. Over the 3 of you, a single, massive blanket of boiled wool is stretched. It is heavy, so heavy that it feels like a physical weight pressing you into the mattress. But as you settle in, you feel it. Within minutes, the air beneath that blanket begins to change. The shivering that had taken hold of your limbs starts to subside as the collective breath and skin temperature of your companions create a microclimate. In a world where the air in the room is freezing, The space beneath that communal quilt is a steady 80 degrees. This was the biology of the Middle Ages. People understood instinctively that the more bodies you could pack into a space, the less work your own metabolism had to do to keep your internal organs from shutting down. This led to a culture of bed sharing that would seem alien to you today. In the grandest houses, even the lord might not sleep truly alone. A trusted servant or a young squire would often sleep on a small truckle bed that rolled out from beneath the massive four-poster, or even at the foot of the master's bed on the floor. This was partly for security, a literal human shield against assassins in the night, but it was also for the warmth. A body at the foot of the bed acted like a living hot water bottle, keeping the chill from creeping up through the heavy linens. When you think about the Great Bed of Ware, a famous piece of furniture from a slightly later period that could hold over a dozen people, you are seeing the logical conclusion of this communal strategy. In inns and castle guest quarters, beds were often massive platforms designed to hold as many people as could fit. You might find yourself sharing a mattress with 3 strangers, all of us lying head to toe or side by side like sardines in a tin. There was a protocol to this, of course. You kept your hands to yourself, you stayed on your side of the ticking, and you took comfort in the rhythmic snoring of the person next to you. In the pitch black of a medieval night, where the only light came from the moon through a narrow slit in the masonry, the sound of other people breathing was the only thing that kept the crushing silence of the winter at bay. But humans were not the only source of heat in this communal strategy. You look down toward the feet of the people sleeping near the hearth and you see the rise and fall of furry backs. Dogs were an essential part of the medieval sleep system. These were not just pets, they were functional tools for thermal regulation. A large greyhound or a thick-coated mastiff across your feet could mean the difference between waking up with frozen toes or waking up in comfort. The term three-dog night, though often associated with the Australian outback, captures a universal truth that medieval castle dwellers knew well. On the coldest nights, you brought the hounds inside, and you let them sleep on the blankets. Their body temperature is higher than that of a human, and their thick fur traps heat with incredible efficiency. You can almost feel the weight of a heavy hound settling across your shins, its warmth seeping through the wool and your stockings, acting as a living anchor against the draft that whistles under the door. The communal quilt extended beyond just the physical act of sharing a bed. It was an entire social structure built around the fire. You notice that the most important people, the ones with the highest status among the servants or the guards, are the ones closest to the dying fire. As you move further away from the hearth, the social standing drops, and the number of blankets increases. If you are relegated to the cold corners of the hall, where the frost is actually sparkling on the interior stones, you don't just use one blanket. You layer. You use sheepskins with the wool still attached, turned inward against your body. You use old tapestries that have become too worn for the walls. You use everything you have to create a barrier. You might wonder about the lack of privacy, but to the person in the medieval castle, privacy was often synonymous with being cold and being vulnerable. There was a profound psychological comfort in the communal sleep. The castle was a fortress against external enemies, but the group was a fortress against the environment. When you are packed in with your kin and your comrades, the darkness is less terrifying. The howling wind outside, which sounds like a screaming ghost as it tears through the battlements, is just noise. Inside the huddle, there is the smell of wood smoke, the scent of unwashed wool, and the steady, reassuring heat of your neighbor. This communal way of life meant that the very architecture of the castle was used differently than we might imagine. The Great Hall was not just a dining room. It was a massive, shared bedroom. The solar, or the private chamber of the Lord, was not just a retreat. It was a concentrated pocket of warmth for a select few. Even in those private chambers, the beds were often shared by siblings, by cousins, or by ladies-in-waiting. The idea of a child having their own room would have been seen as a strange and lonely punishment. Why would you want to be alone in the cold when you could be warm with your sisters? As you lie there in the great hall watching the last flicker of light die out, you realize that this was how humanity survived for centuries. We were not individuals fighting the frost, we were a pack. The communal quilt was a testament to human adaptability. We used our own biology, our own social bonds, and even our animals to create a shield against a climate that wanted to freeze us solid. The stones of the castle are indifferent to your life. They are cold, hard, and ancient. But the person sleeping next to you is warm. Their heart is beating. Their lungs are moving. And in the shared space between you, the winter is held at bay. You pull the heavy wool up to your chin, feel the weight of the dog at your feet and the shoulder of the guard next to you, and you finally drift off. You are not alone, and because of that, you will see the sunrise. The night is a vast, frozen ocean. But here, under the communal quilt, you are safe in a tiny, warm island of humanity. You have learned the most important lesson of the medieval winter. Warmth is not something you find. It is something you share. The heat of the group is the only thing that can truly conquer the cold of the castle. You stand at the edge of the great bedchamber. The hearth fire has burned down to a low, pulsing orange glow, and the shadows of the heavy oak furniture dance against the lime-washed stone walls. Before you lies the most expensive, most engineered, and perhaps most misunderstood piece of technology in the entire castle. It is the bed. In our modern world, a bed is a simple thing, a slab of memory foam or a rectangle of springs tossed onto a metal frame. But here, in the heart of the Middle Ages, your bed is a complex machine designed for one singular purpose, to keep you from freezing in a room where the temperature regularly drops toward the freezing mark. You do not just lie down on this bed. You enter it. You inhabit it. It is a fortress within a fortress. Take a step closer and look at the structure itself. You will notice that you are not looking down at the floor, but rather up. The bed is massive, elevated on a heavy wooden platform or high legs. This is your first line of defense. The stone floor of a castle is a heat sink. It draws the warmth out of everything it touches, and because it is often laid directly over earth or cold storage vaults, it stays damp. By lifting you 2 or 3 feet off the ground, the bed frame keeps you away from the rising moisture and the coldest air that settles near the stones. You climb a small wooden step stool just to reach the top. Underneath the layers of fabric, the foundation of your sleep is not a solid board. If you were to strip away the blankets, you would see a network of heavy hemp ropes woven in a lattice pattern across the wooden frame. This is the suspension system of the medieval world. Over months of use, these ropes will stretch and sag under your weight. Before you climb in tonight, a servant might have used a large wooden tool called a bed wrench to twist the pegs at the side of the frame, pulling those ropes until they are as tight as a drum skin. This is the literal origin of the phrase sleep tight. If the ropes are loose, you will roll into the center and wake up with a cramped back. If they are tight, you stay level and supported. Now, consider the mattress. You are likely imagining a single thick cushion, but for a person of status in a castle, the mattress is a multi-layered affair. First, resting directly on the ropes, is the lower mattress, often called a palliasse. This is a heavy canvas or linen sack stuffed with the coarsest materials available. In a lower status household, this might be pea hulls or straw. In this castle chamber, it is likely stuffed with dried beech leaves or oat chaff. You can hear it crunch as you press your hand against it. This layer provides the bulk and the primary insulation from the air circulating beneath the bed. It smells faintly of a dry harvest, a dusty, earthy scent that reminds you of the fields in late autumn. But nobody wants to sleep directly on crunchy straw. On top of the palliasse lies the true luxury, the feather bed. This is another large linen tick, but instead of stalks and hulls, it is filled with the softest down and feathers harvested from geese or swans. This is the softest thing you have ever felt. When you sit on it, you do not rest on top of it so much as you sink into it. The feathers trap the heat of your body almost instantly. However, this luxury comes with a cost. Feathers have a way of shifting. By the time you wake up, you might find yourself lying on the ropes while all the feathers have migrated to the corners of the sack. This is why, every single morning, the bed must be beaten. You watch as a servant uses a wooden rod to thrash the mattress, redistribution the feathers and trapping fresh air inside the down to restore its loft. As you prepare to climb in, you must face the reality of your roommates. The title of this segment mentions fleas, but they are only the beginning. No matter how clean the castle seems, the organic nature of your bedding makes it a paradise for insects. The straw in the lower mattress is an ideal breeding ground for mites. The feathers can host lice, and the wooden frame, with its deep nooks and crannies, is the perfect hiding place for bedbugs. You might notice a faint, sweet, almond-like smell near the headboard. That is the scent of a bedbug infestation. To combat this, the servants have tucked sachets of dried wormwood, lavender, and mint under the pillows. It helps mask the smell of the damp wool and the unwashed bodies, but it does little to stop the biting. You simply accept that a few small red welts in the morning are the price of a warm night. Now look at the linens. You pull back a heavy coverlet made of boiled wool. It is thick, scratchy, and incredibly heavy. Weight equals warmth in a world without central heating. Beneath the wool are the sheets. If you are wealthy, these are made of fine, bleached linen. Linen is a remarkable fabric. It feels cool when you first touch it, but it is highly breathable and wicks moisture away from your skin. This is vital because beneath 3 layers of wool and a feather mattress, you will likely sweat, even if there is frost on the windows. If you were a common soldier or a kitchen maid, your sheets would be made of hemp, a rough, brownish fabric that feels like rubbing your skin against a burlap sack. But here, the linen is smooth and smells of the lye soap used to wash it in the river. You notice something strange about the pillows. There isn't just one soft place for your head. Instead, there is a bolster, a long, firm, cylinder-shaped cushion that spans the entire width of the bed. It is stuffed firmly with straw or horsehair. On top of this bolster, several smaller feather pillows are propped up. In the medieval period, you do not sleep lying flat on your back like a corpse. There is a widespread belief that lying completely flat is bad for digestion and makes it easier for the humors of the body to settle in the brain, leading to madness or nightmares. More practically, in a world of smoky hearths and damp air, many people suffer from persistent respiratory issues. Sleeping propped up at a 45-degree angle helps you breathe. You are essentially sleeping in a semi-seated position, leaning back against the bolster as if you are reclining at a feast. Finally, you look up and see the true secret to surviving the castle winter. The bed is not open to the room. It is surrounded by a massive wooden framework called a tester, from which hang thick, heavy fabric curtains. These are not decorative lace. They are heavy velvet or thick wool, embroidered with scenes of hunts or floral patterns. When you are ready to sleep, you pull these curtains shut, overlapping them so no gaps remain. You are now in a room within a room. The volume of air you have to heat with your own body has shrunk from the thousands of cubic feet in the stone chamber to the tiny space inside the curtains. Within minutes, the temperature inside this fabric box rises. The curtains block the drafts that whistle through the arrow slits and under the doors. They muffle the sound of the wind howling around the battlements and the occasional clatter of a guard's poleaxe in the corridor. Inside the curtains, the air is still warm and smells of lavender and wool. You reach out and touch the fabric. It is cold on the outside, but as you tuck yourself into the layers of linen and down, you feel the heat reflecting back at you. You realize that the medieval mattress is not just a place to rest. It is a carefully layered insulation system. Every component, from the height of the frame to the tightness of the ropes, the density of the straw, the loft of the feathers, and the heavy drape of the curtains works together to create a microclimate. Outside the curtains, the water in your wash basin might freeze solid before dawn. The dampness of the stone might cause the tapestries on the wall to grow a thin layer of white frost. But here, buried in your nest of feathers and hemp, you are safe. You are part of a tradition of survival that turns a cold, hostile fortress into a place of genuine comfort. You close your eyes, ignore the slight itch of a flea on your ankle, and let the weight of the wool blankets press you down into the silence of the night. You have mastered the anatomy of the bed, and for the next few hours, the winter cannot touch you. You lie perfectly still beneath your layers of wool and fur, but your eyes remain open, fixed on the far wall of the chamber. The world outside the heavy curtains of your bed is a cavern of deep, shifting shadows, but the room is not entirely dark. Across the floor, the great stone fireplace acts as the single, beating heart of the room. You watch the flickering orange light play against the tapestries, turning the woven hunters and hounds into rhythmic, moving ghosts. In a medieval castle, the fire is more than just a source of warmth. It is your primary defense against a cold so profound it can crack stone. But a fire is a living thing, and like any living thing, it requires a careful hand to guide it through the long, lonely hours of the night. You can hear the wind moaning against the exterior masonry, a reminder of the winter gale that is currently whipping around the battlements. It seeks a way in through the arrow slits and the gaps in the window shutters, but for now, the heat from the hearth holds the perimeter. You realize that managing this fire is a delicate balance of physics and timing. If the fire burns too hot and too fast, you will be roasted in your bed for the first 2 hours and then left to freeze in the gray chill of 4 in the morning. If the fire is allowed to die out completely, the task of relighting it in the damp, freezing dawn will be a miserable struggle of flint, steel, and numb fingers. This is where the art of the overnight hearth begins. You watch as a servant, moving like a shadow in the dim light, approaches the fireplace to perform the final ritual of the evening. This task is known as banking the fire. It is not about keeping a roaring blaze going all night. That would be dangerous and wasteful. Instead, it is about preservation. The servant uses a heavy iron poker to pull the glowing red coals into a concentrated heap at the very back of the hearth. They are being pushed against the fire back, a thick plate of cast iron bolted to the rear stone wall. You notice how the iron plate has glowed a dull, angry red all evening, absorbing the heat. Now, as the flames die down, that plate acts as a thermal battery, radiating warmth back into the room long after the wood has turned to ash. The servant then takes the white and gray ash from the edges of the fireplace and carefully shovels it over the glowing embers. To an outsider, it looks like they are smothering the fire, putting it out. But you understand the logic. By burying the hot coals under a layer of insulating ash, The servant is starving them of just enough oxygen to prevent them from burning away completely, while keeping them hot enough to stay alive. It is a slow, controlled smolder. Under that blanket of gray, the embers will sleep, holding their heat like a secret. As the servant finishes, they reach for a large, dome-shaped object made of brass or copper. It looks like a heavy, inverted bowl with small ventilation holes punched into its sides. This is the couvre-feu, a French term meaning cover fire. In your time, this word will eventually evolve into the word curfew. This metal cover is placed directly over the banked embers. It serves a dual purpose. First, it protects the room from stray sparks that might pop and fly onto a rush-covered floor or a nearby rug. Second, it further regulates the airflow, ensuring that the coals last until the first light of dawn. The sound of the metal cover meeting the stone hearth is a heavy, final thud. It is the official signal that the day is over. You inhale deeply, and the air is thick with the scent of the hearth. It is a complex aroma that defines the indoor life of a medieval noble. There is the sharp, resinous tang of pine used for kindling, the deep, earthy scent of slow-burning oak, and perhaps a hint of aromatic herbs like rosemary or dried lavender that were tossed into the flames earlier in the evening to sweeten the air. But beneath the pleasant scents is the constant, underlying smell of wood smoke. In a castle, smoke is an inescapable companion. Even with a well-constructed chimney, the draft can be unpredictable. A sudden gust of wind down the flue can send a puff of gray smoke curling into the room, stinging your eyes and settling into the fibers of your bed hangings. You have grown used to it. To a person of the Middle Ages, the smell of smoke is the smell of safety. You shift slightly under your blankets, feeling the way the temperature in the room is already beginning to change. Without the active flames, the air is growing sharper, but the radiant heat from the stone walls and the banked hearth creates a pocket of survival. You think about the science of the fireplace itself, which is a relatively recent luxury in the history of the world. In the centuries before, most people slept around a central open hearth in the middle of a great hall, with the smoke simply rising to find a hole in the roof. But here, in your private chamber, you have the sophistication of a wall fireplace. It allows you a degree of privacy and comfort that was once unthinkable. Yet, this luxury comes with a hidden terror. Fire is the greatest threat to a castle's inhabitants, second only to plague or siege. The very tapestries that keep out the drafts are highly flammable. The rushes on the floor are dry and prone to catching a spark. The wooden beams of the ceiling, seasoned by years of rising heat, are like tinder. This is why the management of the overnight hearth is a matter of life and death. You trust the person who banked the fire, but a small part of your mind remains vigilant. You listen for the sound of a log shifting or the crackle of something catching that should not be burning. The silence of the room is heavy. Now that the crackling of the fire has been muffled by the couvre-feu, you can hear the smaller sounds of the castle at night. The scuttle of a mouse behind the wainscoting, the distant heavy tread of a guard on the stone gallery outside, the snap of a cooling stone in the chimney. These sounds would be terrifying in total darkness, but the soft, rhythmic pulse of light coming from the vents of the fire cover provides a strange comfort. It is like the breathing of a guardian. You consider the fuel that is currently resting under that cover. In the great forests surrounding the castle, wood is harvested with an eye toward the winter. Hardwoods like oak, beech, and ash are the gold standard for a night like this. They are dense and hold their heat for hours. Softwoods like pine or fir are used only for starting the fire, as they burn too fast and throw too many dangerous sparks. You might even have a heavy log of peat or a thick stump of root wood tucked into the embers, something that will burn with a slow, stubborn intensity. The quality of your sleep tonight depends entirely on the quality of the wood that was gathered last summer. As the hour grows later, the room continues to cool, but the environment inside your curtained bed remains stable. You are experiencing the ultimate medieval hack for surviving the winter. You have used the hearth to heat the masonry of the room, you have used the bed curtains to trap that heat, and you have used the banking technique to ensure that the source of warmth does not vanish while you are unconscious. It is a manual, human-driven thermostat. You realize that in the morning the process will reverse. The servant will return before the sun rises, their breath misting in the freezing air of the room. They will lift the couvre-feu, rake away the gray ash, and find those same red embers still glowing. With a bit of fresh kindling and a gentle breath, the fire will be reborn in seconds. The continuity of the fire is the continuity of life in the castle. If the fire goes out, the cold moves in, and once the cold truly takes hold of a stone room, it is very hard to evict. But for now, the embers are doing their work. You feel a sense of gratitude for the heavy iron and the gray ash. The orange light on the wall has dimmed to a deep, dark crimson. The shadows have lengthened, swallowing the corners of the room, but the center holds. The hearth is managed. The house is safe. The wind can scream all it wants against the thick lime-washed walls, but it cannot reach the warmth that has been so carefully tucked away for the night. You close your eyes, the smell of wood smoke a familiar lullaby, and allow yourself to drift into a deep sleep, knowing that the heart of the room will still be beating when you wake. You lie there in the dark, and though your upper body is nestled deep within the heavy folds of woolen blankets and furs, there is a persistent, nagging ache at the very bottom of the bed. Your feet are like 2 blocks of ice. No matter how much you curl your toes or rub your ankles together, the sheer volume of the cold air trapped at the foot of the bed seems to be winning the battle. In a medieval castle, the floor is usually stone, and the drafts have a way of crawling upward, seeking out any pocket of warmth to extinguish. But tonight, you are not resigned to the frost. You reach out a foot, testing the darkness near the edge of the mattress, until your toes make contact with something hard, smooth, and wonderfully radiantly hot. This is the ceramic bed warmer, an object of humble clay that transformed the way people survived the brutal winters of the Middle Ages and beyond. You might know it by its more common, later name, the bed pig, but its ancestors were being shaped on potter's wheels long before the industrial age. To understand why this simple vessel was such a miracle of engineering, you have to understand the sheer physical challenge of keeping a body warm when the world around it is freezing. A fire in the hearth is a beautiful thing, but as you have already discovered, its heat is directional. It toasts your face while your back remains chilled. It warms the air in the center of the room, but the corners remain trapped in a permanent winter. The bed, tucked away in an alcove or behind heavy curtains, is often the furthest point from that flickering life blood of the hearth. You pull the object closer with your feet, feeling its weight. It is heavy, solid, and comforting. Earlier in the evening, you watched as this vessel was prepared. It was not a high-tech process, but it required a certain rhythm and care. The ceramic itself is a dense stoneware, fired in a kiln until it became almost as hard as the stones of the castle walls. Unlike the porous earthenware used for common cooking pots, this stoneware has been glazed. You can feel the glass-like texture under your soles, a slick surface that ensures the water inside stays where it belongs. The evolution of this tool began with something much simpler. For centuries, you and your ancestors would have relied on a hot stone plucked from the edge of the fire. You would wrap that stone in a thick piece of old flannel or a scrap of worn-out tunic and tuck it into the straw of your mattress. It worked, certainly, but stones are fickle things. They can be too hot, scorching the fabric and filling the room with the smell of singed wool. They lose their heat quickly as the core of the rock cools down. And, if you are not careful, a hot stone can crack or even explode if it was pulled too quickly from a damp spot near the hearth. But then came the ceramicist. By shaping clay into a hollow vessel, they discovered a way to harness the most efficient heat conductor available to the medieval world: water. You shift your legs, feeling the gentle slosh of the liquid inside your warmer. Water has a remarkable ability to hold onto heat. When the servant filled this bottle at the large copper kettle over the kitchen fire, the water was boiling, a rolling, steaming mass of energy. As that water was poured into the narrow neck of the ceramic bottle, the clay began to absorb the heat, radiating it outward in a slow, steady pulse. The shape of the vessel you are using is a marvel of practical design. It is not a round bottle that would roll away the moment you moved your legs. No, this one is flattened on one side, allowing it to sit firmly on the mattress without escaping into the shadows of the bed frame. In later centuries, these would be nicknamed pigs because of their stout, rounded bodies and the way the small filling snout resembled a nose. But for now, it is simply your lifeline. It is a dense, earthy orange in color, perhaps decorated with a simple salt glaze that gives it a pebbled, orange peel texture. As you press your heels against the warm clay, you can feel the heat beginning to penetrate the many layers of skin and muscle. It is a deep, thrumming warmth that seems to travel up your shins and settle in your marrow. The beauty of the ceramic bed warmer lies in its endurance. Because the clay is thick, it acts as an insulator and a radiator simultaneously. It prevents the boiling water from burning you instantly, while ensuring that the heat is released over the course of several hours rather than all at once. By the time the sun begins to creep over the horizon and the castle cocks begin to crow, this bottle will still be lukewarm, a lingering memory of the fire that birthed it. Think about the craftsmanship that went into this object. The potter would have dug the clay from a local riverbank, treading it with their bare feet to work out the air bubbles and stones. They would have sat at a heavy wooden wheel, kicking a large stone flywheel to keep the momentum going as they pulled the walls of the bottle upward. Every curve was designed for your comfort. The neck is narrow, easy to plug with a carved wooden bung or a tightly twisted piece of cork. The shoulders of the bottle are sloped to prevent cracking under the pressure of the heat. It is a piece of the earth, literally, fired in the heart of a kiln, brought into your bed to fight back the cold of the stone world. There is a specific smell associated with this nightly ritual. As the heat from the ceramic bottle interacts with the dampness that inevitably clings to medieval bedding, a faint, earthy aroma fills your nostrils. It is the scent of wet wool, dried lavender if you are lucky enough to have some tucked in your linens, and the faint mineral tang of the fired clay itself. It is a smell that means safety. It means that for the next 8 hours, the frost that is currently forming patterns on the window slits cannot touch you. You might wonder why they did not just use metal. After all, a copper or brass pan would be thinner and lighter. And indeed, in the wealthier chambers of the castle, you might see a brass warming pan with a long handle, filled with glowing coals and slid between the sheets to preheat the bed. But the ceramic bottle has an advantage over the metal pan. The metal pan is for the moment before you get in. It is too hot and too dangerous to leave in the bed with you while you sleep. One wrong move and you would be burned by the metal or, worse, The lid could pop open and spill hot embers onto your straw mattress, turning your bed into a funeral pyre. The ceramic bottle, however, is a companion. It is safe. It is sturdy. You can wrap it in a thick stocking or a piece of linen and cuddle it against your stomach if the chill is particularly biting. It represents a shift in how people lived in these great stone fortresses. It shows an understanding of thermodynamics long before the word existed. It shows that even in a world of high stone walls and drafty halls, the human desire for a bit of luxury, for the simple joy of toasty toes, drove innovation in the most common of materials. As you drift back towards sleep, your feet finally thawing, you realize that this object is a bridge. It connects the roaring, chaotic heat of the great hall fire to the private, quiet sanctuary of your bed. It is a portable piece of the hearth. The potter who threw the clay, the woodsman who cut the fuel for the kiln, the servant who hauled the water from the well and boiled it over the flames, they have all conspired to give you this one simple thing: comfort. The weight of the bottle is a grounding force. In a world where so much is uncertain, where the wind howls through the battlements and the shadows seem to move in the corner of your eye, the steady, unmoving heat of the stoneware is a certainty. You adjust your position one last time, tucking the bottle firmly against the soles of your feet. The chill of the room is still there, hovering just inches from your nose, but beneath the blankets, in your own private microclimate, the ceramic warmer is doing its silent work. You are no longer a prisoner of the medieval winter. You are a master of your own warmth, guarded by a humble vessel of baked earth and hot water, ready to face the long, dark hours until the dawn. The castle might be a fortress of cold stone, but inside your bed, the evolution of the ceramic warmer has created a pocket of summer that no winter gale can breach. You stand at the edge of your massive, curtained bed, watching your breath bloom in a white cloud against the dim light of a single tallow candle. The stone walls of the chamber are thick, but they have a way of soaking up the winter chill until the very air feels heavy and wet. Outside, the wind howls through the battlements, but inside, the silence is punctuated only by the occasional pop of a dying ember in the hearth. You are about to engage in a nightly ritual that is as much about survival as it is about rest. To the modern mind, the idea of getting ready for bed involves stripping down to something light and airy, but in the heart of a medieval winter, that would be a dangerous mistake. You must now layer yourself in a suit of soft armor designed to trap every precious calorie of body heat. You begin by removing your outer garments. The heavy wool surcoat and the thick tunic are set aside, but you do not remain bare for long. The first layer you pull over your head is your chemise or your smock. For a person of your status in the castle, this is made of the finest linen. It is a long, loose-fitting garment that reaches down past your knees. As the fabric settles against your skin, it feels shockingly cold for a fleeting second, but linen has a remarkable quality. It is a breathable, natural fiber that quickly wicks away any moisture from your skin while beginning to trap a thin layer of air. In an age where bathing is a labor-intensive luxury, the linen smock also serves as a barrier, protecting your expensive furs and heavy blankets from the oils and sweat of your body. But a simple linen shift is not enough to keep the frost at bay. You reach for your night robe, a garment that would make a modern king envious. This is where the true engineering of medieval warmth reveals itself. This robe is not merely a piece of clothing but a masterpiece of insulation. It is lined with fur. As you slip your arms into the sleeves, you feel the incredible softness of squirrel pelts, known as vair, or perhaps the plush thickness of rabbit fur. For the truly wealthy, this might be ermine or sable. The fur is turned inward, placed directly against the linen of your smock, so that the dense hairs can trap a pocket of still air around your torso. There is a reason why fur was the ultimate status symbol of the Middle Ages, and it was not just about fashion. It was the only technology available that could effectively combat a room where the temperature might actually drop below freezing during the night. You wrap the robe tightly around you, feeling the immediate shift in your personal climate. The weight of it is comforting, a heavy embrace that signals to your brain that it is safe to sleep. But you are not finished yet. You must address the most critical point of heat loss, your head. You reach for your nightcap. To the modern eye, a nightcap might look a bit ridiculous, perhaps even comical, but in a drafty castle, it is a piece of life-saving equipment. The nightcap you pull onto your head is made of thick, quilted wool or perhaps a padded silk, covers your ears and ties securely under your chin. We often forget that medieval castles were not just cold, they were incredibly drafty. Even with heavy tapestries covering the walls, the wind found its way through the narrow arrow slits and under the heavy oak doors. A stray breeze moving across your scalp in the middle of the night could pull the heat right out of your body, leaving you shivering and awake. By securing this cap, you are sealing the top of your personal heat chamber. It keeps your ears warm and prevents that deep, aching cold from settling into your neck and shoulders. Next, you look to your feet. The stone floor is like a slab of ice, and even though you are standing on a rush mat or a small rug, the cold seems to seep upward through the soles of your feet. You pull on a pair of thick wool stockings. These are not like the thin socks of the future. These are heavy, hand-knitted or sewn from woven cloth, reaching all the way up to your thighs and held in place with simple garters. On top of these, you might even slide on a pair of soft leather slippers or fur-lined booties. Keeping the extremities warm is the key to falling asleep quickly. If your feet are cold, your heart will work overtime to pump warm blood to them, keeping your entire system in a state of alert that prevents deep rest. As you stand there, fully dressed for sleep, you realize you are wearing more layers than a modern person might wear to go for a walk in a light snow. You have the linen smock, the fur-lined robe, the heavy wool stockings, and the padded nightcap. You feel bulky, almost like a hibernating bear, but the sensation of the cold air on your face is now a sharp contrast to the radiating warmth of your body. You move toward the bed, the candle flickering as you walk. The ritual of dressing for sleep is a transition from the public world of the castle to the private world of the bed. In the daytime, your clothes showed your rank through their colors and their cut. At night, your clothes show your rank through their warmth. A servant sleeping on a pallet in the great hall might have only a single rough wool tunic and a thin blanket. They would huddle together for warmth, using the communal heat of bodies to survive. But you, in your private chamber, have the luxury of these specialized garments. You have the ability to create a microclimate that belongs entirely to you. Before you climb into the bed, you take a moment to adjust your nightrobe one last time. You think about the materials. The linen came from flax plants grown in the fields, soaked, beaten, and spun into thread. The wool came from the sheep grazing on the hillsides, sheared and woven by hand. The fur came from the deep forests, trapped by hunters who knew the value of a thick winter coat. All of these elements of the natural world have been harvested and refined to keep you alive in a structure of cold, dead stone. You finally blow out the candle. The room is plunged into a darkness so thick you can almost feel it. But you are prepared. You climb into the bed, sliding between the layers of blankets and quilts that have been pre-warmed. The fur of your robe mingles with the wool of the blankets, creating a cocoon of heat. You can hear the ice rattling against the window pane, a sound that would have been terrifying if you were unprotected. Instead, it is a lullaby. The weight of your clothing and the bedding combined creates a sensation similar to what we would today call a weighted blanket. It grounds you. It provides a sense of security that is physical as well as psychological. In this world, the night is long and the winter is unforgiving, but you have built a suit of fabric and fur that allows you to defy the elements. As you settle into the mattress, your chin tucked into the fur collar of your robe and your cap snug against your ears, the sub-zero temperatures of the room no longer matter. You are a warm, living thing in a cold, stone world, and your fur-lined dreams are about to begin. The transition from the waking world of the castle to the deep sleep of the medieval night is complete. You are no longer a person of the court or a master of the house. You are a creature of the nest, wrapped in the best insulation the Middle Ages could provide. The cold can scratch at the door and the wind can howl through the stones, but they cannot reach you. Within your layers of linen, wool, and fur, you have found the ultimate victory over the medieval winter. You have transformed a frozen fortress into a sanctuary of warmth, one layer at a time. Through the night, your body will maintain its steady heat, protected by the wisdom of generations who knew exactly what it took to stay alive when the world turned to ice. Your breath slows, your muscles relax, and the heavy, fur-lined silence of the chamber becomes your entire universe. You are sitting on a heavy oak bench in the dim, flickering light of the great hall. The stones of the castle walls are sweating with dampness, and the air around you is so sharp it feels like it could cut your skin. Even with your heavy woolens and your furs, the cold is a physical presence. It is a weight that presses against your chest and seeps into your marrow. But then, a servant places a wooden bowl in front of you. It is filled to the brim with a thick, steaming sludge. You do not look at it with the picky eyes of a modern diner. You look at it as a drowning man looks at a life raft. This is your pottage. It is the fuel that will keep your internal fire burning through the long, frozen hours of the night. To understand how you survive a medieval winter, you must stop thinking of food as merely flavor or nutrition. You must begin to think of it as thermal energy. In the medieval mind, the body was a furnace. The stomach was the hearth where the fires of life were stoked. If that fire went out, the cold from the stone walls would rush in to fill the void, and you would not wake up in the morning. This is why your evening meal is the most critical part of your survival strategy. It is the foundation of your internal defense. As you lift the heavy wooden spoon to your lips, you feel the heat radiating from the bowl before the liquid even touches your tongue. This pottage is a dense, slow-burning mixture. It is thick with barley and oats, grains that have been boiled for hours until they have released all their starches, turning the water into a heavy, viscous cream. There are leeks in here and onions, and perhaps a few wrinkled carrots pulled from the root cellar. If you are lucky, there might be a few scraps of salt pork or a bit of bacon fat that has melted into the broth, creating golden rings of grease that shimmer in the candlelight. That fat is precious. In the modern world, we often try to avoid it, but here in the heart of a medieval winter, fat is your best friend. It is the highest density fuel available to you. As you swallow the pottage, you can feel the warmth spreading down your throat and settling into your chest. It is a slow, rolling heat. Unlike a quick snack, this heavy grain-based meal takes hours for your body to break down. This is intentional. As your body works to digest the complex carbohydrates and the fats, your metabolic rate increases. This process, known as the thermic effect of food, actually generates heat from the inside out. By eating this massive, heavy meal just before you retire to your chambers, you are essentially putting a large, slow-burning log on the fire of your own metabolism. You tear off a hunk of coarse, dark bread to soak up the last of the moisture in your bowl. This bread is not the light, airy loaf you might find in a modern bakery. It is dense, heavy, and packed with fiber. It requires effort to chew and effort to digest. Every movement of your jaw and every contraction of your stomach is a tiny mechanical action that generates a fraction of a degree of warmth. By the time you finish the bowl, your forehead is damp with a thin sheen of sweat, despite the fact that the water in the pitcher at the end of the table has already begun to skim over with ice. But the food is only half of the equation. Now you reach for your tankard. Inside is the liquid fire that gives this segment its name. It is not water. You would rarely drink plain water in the winter, not just because of the risk of contamination, but because water is cold. Water offers nothing to the internal hearth. Instead, you drink ale. This is not the crisp, filtered lager of the future. This is medieval ale. It is thick, cloudy, and slightly sweet. It is often served warm, or at least at room temperature, having been kept near the kitchen fires. As you take a deep pull from the tankard, you feel the alcohol begin to work its magic. Ale was often referred to as liquid bread, and for good reason. It is packed with calories from the fermented grain. While the pottage provides the slow-burning logs for your internal fire, the ale provides the kindling. The alcohol causes your blood vessels to dilate, a process called vasodilation. You feel a sudden, rushing wave of warmth move toward your skin. In the short term, this makes you feel immensely more comfortable. It relaxes the muscles that have been tensed against the cold all day. It numbs the ache in your joints. It creates a temporary illusion of heat that allows you to make the treacherous journey from the warm hall, through the freezing corridors, and into your bed without shivering so hard that you lose your breath. For the nobility, this liquid fire is even more potent. If you were a lord or a lady, your tankard might be replaced with a goblet of spiced wine, known as hypocras. This is wine that has been infused with ginger, cinnamon, long pepper, and cloves. In the medieval theory of the four humors, these spices were considered intensely hot and dry. They were believed to counteract the cold and moist nature of winter. As you sip the hypocras, the ginger bites at your throat and the pepper stings your tongue. This is not just a culinary preference. It is a medicinal application of heat. The spices stimulate your circulation and trick your brain into feeling a deep, radiating warmth that penetrates all the way to your bones. Imagine the sensation of that spice. It is a sharp, prickling heat that contrasts with the heavy, dull warmth of the pottage. It wakes up your senses even as the alcohol begins to make your eyelids heavy. You can feel the heat blooming in your stomach like a glowing coal. This is the core warmth you will carry with you. When you eventually leave the hall and climb the spiral stairs to your bedchamber, you are carrying a reservoir of caloric energy. Your body is busy processing the grains, the fats, the sugars from the ale, and the stimulating spices. You must realize that in this era, your body is your only true heater. The fireplace in your room might go out. The tapestries might let in a draft. The furs might shift in the night. But as long as your heart is beating and your stomach is churning, you are generating your own warmth. This is why the evening ritual of eating and drinking is so much more than a social event. It is a biological necessity. A man who goes to bed hungry in a medieval castle is a man who may not have the energy to keep his heart beating against the sub-zero temperatures of a February night. As you finally crawl under the heavy layers of your bed, you can feel the pottage still sitting heavy and warm in your belly. It is like a hot stone tucked inside your ribs. The ale has smoothed over the edges of your shivering. The spices are still tingling on your breath. You pull the blankets up to your chin and exhale. A cloud of steam leaves your mouth, visible even in the darkness of the room. But inside you are glowing. Your blood is rich with the energy of the fields and the fermented strength of the grain. The wind may howl against the battlements, and the frost may grow thick on the inside of the window glass, but you are insulated from the within. You have fueled the furnace. You have stoked the hearth. The liquid fire of the ale and the dense, earthy heat of the pottage have created a microclimate within your own skin. You close your eyes, feeling the steady, rhythmic pulse of your own warmth. You are not just a person sleeping in a cold room. You are a biological engine, burning through the night, defiant and warm against the crushing weight of the medieval winter. The silence of the castle returns, but the fire in your core remains, a quiet, flickering flame that will keep the shadows of the frost at bay until the first light of the winter sun touches the tops of the towers. The fire in the hearth has settled into a deep, pulsing crimson, and the heavy velvet curtains of your bed are drawn tight. You are cocooned in layers of wool and linen, yet the castle around you is a vast, hungry beast of stone that breathes out a chill so profound it seems to seep through the very wood of the bed frame. In this stillness, you realize that even the finest textiles have their limits. The heat you generated when you first climbed under the covers is slowly being stolen by the damp air. But then you feel a shift. A heavy, rhythmic weight presses down against the furs at the foot of the bed. There is a low, contented huff of breath, followed by the familiar sound of a body settling into a circle. You stretch your toes forward, and instead of the biting cold of the air, you encounter a radiating, solid wall of warmth. This is your most loyal furnace. This is the hound. To understand the medieval bedchamber, you must look past the tapestries and the silver basins and see it for what it truly was: a communal ecosystem. In our modern world, we think of the bedroom as a private sanctuary, a place where we sleep alone or with a partner, isolated from the rest of the world by thick insulation and central heating. But for the lord or lady of a medieval castle, the night was rarely a solitary affair. And while you might share your bed with a spouse or even a high-ranking servant for safety and warmth, one of the most effective tools for surviving a winter night was the animal. You reach down with your hand, feeling the coarse, thick fur of a large hunting dog. In the Middle Ages, dogs were not merely pets in the way we think of them today. They were working tools, companions in the chase, and guardians of the gate. But when the sun went down and the frost began to crawl up the interior walls of the keep, they took on a new vital role as living heaters. The biology of the dog is perfectly suited for this. A dog's natural body temperature is several degrees higher than that of a human, usually hovering around 101 or 102 degrees Fahrenheit. To a shivering person in a drafty room, a large dog is essentially a 100-pound bag of hot water that never goes cold. Imagine the sensation as the dog presses its back against your shins. The heat is intense and steady. It is a biological furnace that burns on the scraps of meat it was tossed at dinner, converting that protein into a literal lifeline for you. This practice was so common that it influenced the very breeds of dogs that were favored by the nobility. While the great mastiffs and wolfhounds might stay in the great hall to guard the doors, the swifter, leaner hounds like greyhounds or the smaller, softer spaniels were often granted the privilege of the bedchamber. You might wonder about the cleanliness of such an arrangement. To your modern sensibilities, the idea of a dog that has spent its day running through mud and brush climbing onto your bed might seem repulsive. But you must remember that in the medieval world, the definition of clean was vastly different. The smell of the dog, a mix of musk and earth, was often preferable to the smell of damp stone and the faint, lingering odor of the garderobe. Furthermore, the presence of the dog served another, more practical purpose in the realm of hygiene. Dogs were known as flea magnets. The common belief, which held a surprising amount of practical truth, was that the biting insects would be more attracted to the higher body heat and thick fur of the animal than to the relatively cool and smooth skin of the human. By keeping the hound at your feet, you were essentially offering a sacrificial host for the parasites of the night. As you lie there, the rhythmic rise and fall of the dog's breathing begins to synchronize with your own. This is the psychological warmth that animals provide. In a world where the night was truly dark and the shadows of a castle were filled with the creaks of settling stone and the whistling of the wind, the presence of a living, breathing guardian provided a sense of security that no bolt on a door could match. If an intruder were to move through the outer chamber, or if a fire were to break out in the kitchens below, the hound would know long before you did. Its ears, even in sleep, are attuned to the frequencies of the castle. To sleep with a dog was to sleep with an alarm system that doubled as a blanket. The use of animal heat was not limited to the great hounds at the foot of the bed. If you were a lady of high status, you might have a smaller companion, a lapdog, often a breed of small spaniel or a terrier. These tiny creatures were not just for show or for playing in the gardens. They were designed to be tucked into the wide, flowing sleeves of a gown during the day to keep the wrists warm, and at night, they were brought into the bed to be held against the chest or the stomach. If you have ever suffered from a stomach ache or the deep, aching chill that settles in the core of the body, you can imagine the relief of a small, furry, vibrating creature curled directly against your skin. They were living hot pads, portable and affectionate. In the lower levels of the castle, or in the cottages of the peasants who served the estate, this concept was taken to an even greater extreme. While you, as a person of status, have the luxury of a raised bed and a dedicated hound, the servants sleeping in the hall or the stables might huddle together with livestock. In many medieval dwellings, the barn and the living quarters were separated by nothing more than a thin partition or were part of the same open space. The collective body heat of oxen, sheep, and pigs would rise into the rafters, keeping the humans sleeping above or beside them from freezing. It was a symbiotic relationship of the most basic kind. The humans provided shelter and food, and the animals provided the warmth necessary for the humans to survive to see the next morning. Back in your bed, the hound shifts again. Perhaps it is dreaming of the hunt, its paws twitching against your ankles as it chases a phantom stag through a forest of sleep. This movement, though it might wake you for a moment, is a reassurance. It is a reminder that you are not alone in the cold. You reach out and scratch the thick fur behind the animal's ears, feeling the solid bone and the heat radiating from its skin. The dog lets out a long, shuddering sigh and presses closer, its weight a comforting anchor in the sea of linen. The medieval night was a test of endurance, a long crawl through the shadows where the temperature could drop low enough to freeze the water in your wash basin. Every layer of protection mattered. The tapestries on the walls slowed the loss of heat, the bed curtains created a microclimate, and the furs provided insulation. But those are all passive things. The dog is active. It is a living process, a chemical reaction of life that produces heat as a byproduct of its very existence. In the hierarchy of the castle, the dog was often treated better than the lowest servants precisely because of this utility. A good hound was an investment in comfort and survival. As you drift back towards sleep, the sounds of the castle continue to fade. The wind howls against the battlements, and the frost thickens on the narrow window panes, etching patterns of ice where the moonlight hits the glass. But inside the circle of the bed curtains, the air remains tolerable. You are tucked between the warmth of the embers in the hearth and the living heat of the beast at your feet. The hound's heart beats slow and steady, a drumbeat of life that defies the frozen silence of the stone. In this moment, you understand that the bond between human and dog was forged not just in the light of the hunt, but in the deepest, coldest reaches of the winter night. You pull the furs up to your chin, settle your feet against the warm flank of your companion, and let the heaviness of sleep take you, protected by the oldest heater known to mankind. The cold remains outside, biting at the walls, but here, in the heart of the chamber, the animal heat holds the winter at bay. You leave the sanctuary of the inner chambers behind. The heavy scent of expensive wax and the soft rustle of silk tapestries fade as you descend the narrow stone stairs, moving deeper into the belly of the castle. The air here is different. It is thinner, sharper, and carries the unmistakable bite of the winter night. As you move, your breath begins to bloom in white clouds before you, illuminated only by the flickering torch you carry against the gloom. This is the world of the servants, the soldiers, the pages, and the laborers. For them, the castle is not a collection of private retreats or luxury suites. It is a vast, cold machine of stone that must be endured, and the night is a challenge that requires more than just a blanket to survive. The Great Hall is the center of this world. During the daylight hours, it is a place of frantic business and loud feasting. It is filled with the roar of voices, the clatter of wooden plates, and the heavy smells of roasting meat. But now, as the candles gutter out and the last of the logs turns to a heap of glowing ash in the central hearth, the hall transforms. It becomes a massive, communal dormitory. You look across the wide expanse of the floor and see that the space is not empty. There are shapes huddled everywhere. There are no individual rooms for these people, no wooden bed frames, and certainly no down-filled mattresses. There is only the floor, stretching out like a frozen lake of gray stone. You reach down and touch the floor, and the cold is immediate, traveling up your arm like a physical shock. Stone is a thermal sponge. It does not just feel cold. It actively sucks the heat out of anything it touches. To sleep directly on it is to invite a chill that can settle into the bones and turn a simple shiver into a deadly fever. This is why the floor is covered in a thick layer of rushes and straw. To the modern eye, it might look like a messy, unkempt barn floor, but to the medieval servant, this straw is the primary line of defense against the freezing earth. In some castles, this floor covering is a mixture of dried grasses and aromatic herbs like lavender, meadowsweet, or chamomile. These were added to mask the scent of damp and sweat, but as you kneel, you can smell the underlying reality of the medieval floor. It is earthy, slightly musty, and it crunches under your weight. The straw is piled deep, creating a buffer of air between the human body and the hungry stone. This is your mattress. It is itchy, it is dusty, and it hides a multitude of secrets, but it is the only thing keeping you from the direct embrace of the winter floor. As you look around the hall, you notice that people are not sleeping alone. For the servant or the soldier, the most effective heater ever invented is the person sleeping next to them. You see them now lying in long rows or small, tight clusters. They are packed together so closely that it is hard to tell where one person ends and the next begins. This is not a matter of choice or a lack of personal space. It is a vital strategy for survival. By pressing shoulder to shoulder, they create a shared microclimate. The heat that escapes from one body is caught and recycled by the person next to them. Underneath a shared, coarse wool blanket, a group of 3 or 4 laborers can generate enough collective warmth to stave off the frost that forms on the interior walls. You imagine yourself finding a space among them. You would feel the rhythmic rise and fall of their breathing and the heavy, humid warmth trapped beneath the thick wool. In this environment, privacy is a luxury that no one can afford. Survival is a communal effort. The person next to you is your furnace, and you are theirs. You look at what they are wearing as they sleep. No one undresses here. The concept of nightwear is a fantasy reserved for the lords and ladies in the high towers. To sleep in the Great Hall is to sleep in your workday clothes. You would be wearing your linen chemise or shirt, which acts as a base layer to wick away sweat. Over that, you would have a heavy wool tunic, perhaps doubled up if the winter is particularly harsh. Your legs remain wrapped in wool hose, and you might even keep your leather boots on, though many would wrap their feet in extra rags before settling down. Most importantly, you would have your hood pulled up. A medieval hood is not just a piece of fashion. It is a vital piece of survival gear. It covers the neck, the ears, and the back of the head, which are the areas where heat escapes most rapidly. You see a young page curled into a tight ball, his hood pulled so low that only the tip of his nose is visible. He looks like a small island of warmth in a sea of cold stone. Even his hands are tucked deep into his sleeves or pressed against his chest. Every inch of exposed skin is a leak where life-sustaining heat can escape. The fire in the center of the hall is a dying eye of red. It is the duty of the night watch to ensure it does not go out completely, but it is no longer the roaring blaze of the evening. The smoke rises in lazy ribbons, swirling around the high, dark rafters before finding its way out through the louvers or the smoke hole in the roof. This creates a constant movement of air. You feel a draft pull at your hair, a thin, icy finger that seems to come from nowhere. It comes from the arrow slits high in the walls and the gaps beneath the massive oak doors. The castle is never truly airtight. It breathes. It sucks in the freezing night and exhales the warmth of the day. To sleep here is to listen to the castle groan as the stone contracts in the cold. The straw beneath you is more than just insulation. It is a living ecosystem. As you settle into your spot, you might feel a sudden, tiny movement near your hand or a sharp itch on your ankle. Fleas, lice, and mice are constant companions in the lower levels of the castle. The warmth of the human bodies attracts them as much as it preserves the humans themselves. It is a trade-off that everyone accepts. You endure the itch and the occasional bite in exchange for the warmth of the huddle. If the straw is fresh, it provides a springy, dry layer that is surprisingly comfortable. But if the winter has been long and the rushes have not been changed, they become compressed, greasy, and damp. Dampness is the true enemy. When the straw becomes wet from a leaking roof or from the condensation that drips off the cold stone walls, it loses its ability to trap air. It becomes a conductor, pulling the cold directly from the ground into your body. You see a servant shifting uncomfortably, trying to find a dry patch of floor where he can curl up. He is lucky if he has a leather hide or a piece of heavy canvas to lay down first, acting as a moisture barrier between him and the sodden rushes. Near the edge of the hearth, you see a group of hunting hounds. They are large, shaggy creatures with thick coats, and they are as much a part of the heating system as the fire itself. In the medieval world, dogs were often welcomed into the sleeping areas, not just as companions, but as living heaters. On the coldest nights, a man might pull a couple of hounds close to his body, letting their high internal temperature radiate into him. The dogs grunt and twitch in their sleep, dreaming of the hunt, and their fur smells of wet earth and old meat. But their heat is a blessing that can mean the difference between a night of shivering and a night of actual rest. Where you sleep in the hall depends entirely on your status. The closer you are to the dais, the better your night will be. Near the head of the hall, the walls might be thicker, and the heat from the hearth lingers longer. If you are a high-ranking servant, perhaps a steward or a head cook, you might even have a small pallet, a simple sack stuffed with straw that lifts you a few inches off the floor. But if you are a low-ranking laborer or a traveler who has been granted a spot for the night, you might find yourself near the screen's passage at the far end of the hall. This is the coldest spot in the entire room. It is located near the service doors that lead to the kitchens and the buttery. These doors are opened and closed throughout the night, letting in blasts of freezing air. Here, the wind howls through the gaps, and the straw is often worn thin by the passage of feet during the day. You see the men there wrapping themselves in their own cloaks, pulling their knees to their chests to minimize the surface area of their bodies. They sleep in fitful bursts, woken often by the cold or the sound of the wind whistling through the stone. As the hours pass and the deep middle of the night settles in, a profound silence falls over the hall, broken only by the rhythmic sound of 100 people breathing and the occasional crackle of a cooling ember. The castle feels like a tomb, cold and silent. But inside those huddles, beneath the wool and the straw, there is a stubborn, persistent heat. It is a testament to human resilience. These people have learned to live with the stone, to find warmth in each other, and to turn the very floor into a shield against the winter. When the first gray light of dawn begins to filter through the high, narrow windows, the ordeal does not end instantly. You imagine waking up in this environment. Your muscles are stiff from the hard floor. Your joints ache from the cold that has managed to seep through your layers of wool. The first movement of the morning is a struggle. You have to beat your arms against your chest and stomp your feet to get the blood flowing again. The air in the hall is thick and heavy, smelling of unwashed bodies, stale wood smoke, and the earthy, sweet scent of the straw. But as you stand up and shake the rushes from your tunic, you realize that you have made it. You have weathered the chill of the castle floor. The stone did not win tonight. Through the simple materials of straw, wool, and the shared warmth of your fellow man, you have survived another night in the heart of the Middle Ages. You lie there in the dark, the heavy wool blankets pressing down on your chest with a comforting weight. For a moment, you feel a sense of triumph. You have successfully navigated the freezing draft of the stone corridor and found your way into the nest of your bedding. The chill of the castle air is kept at bay by the layers of fabric and the residual heat of the room. But as you stare up into the shadows of the vaulted ceiling, a flicker of orange light dances across the stones. You hear a soft, rhythmic popping sound, like the snapping of dry fingers. It is the fire in the hearth. While that fire is the only thing keeping the deadly winter frost from seeping into your marrow, it is also the greatest threat to your life. In the medieval world, heat and hazard are two sides of the same coin. To survive the night, you must invite a monster into your bedroom and hope it stays confined to its cage of stone. Think about the materials that surround you right now. You are tucked into a bed made of seasoned timber. Beneath you is a mattress stuffed with dry straw or perhaps wool. On the floor beneath the bed, there is a thick layer of rushes, dried grasses and herbs intended to provide insulation and a pleasant scent. If you are in a more luxurious chamber, the walls are draped with heavy tapestries. These are beautiful, certainly, but they are also essentially giant sheets of combustible fuel hanging just inches away from the air. In a world before electricity, fire is not a utility that you turn on and off with a switch. It is a living, breathing entity that requires constant management. As you watch the embers pulse with a dull, red light, you realize that you are sleeping inside a tinderbox. In the earlier days of castle construction, The fire was often located in the very center of the great hall. This was the hearth, a raised stone platform where massive logs were piled high. The smoke would rise toward the ceiling, swirling in the rafters before eventually finding its way out through a hole in the roof called a louve. While this central fire provided a large area of warmth, it was incredibly dangerous for anyone sleeping nearby. A single log rolling off the hearth could ignite the rushes on the floor in seconds. If you were a servant or a soldier sleeping on a pallet of straw near that central fire, you lived in a state of hyper-awareness. You had to trust that the person on watch would see the spark before it turned into an inferno. By the time you find yourself in a more developed medieval castle, the technology has shifted to the wall fireplace. This was a massive leap forward in comfort. With a chimney to draw the smoke away, the air in the room became breathable. You no longer woke up with your eyes stinging and your throat coated in soot. However, the chimney created its own set of problems. To work properly, a fireplace needs a draft. This means that while the fire is roaring, it is actively pulling cold air from the windows and the gaps under the doors toward itself. You might find that your front is roasting while your back is freezing. To combat this, you move your bed closer to the hearth. You pull the heavy curtains of your four-poster bed shut to trap the warmth. But every inch you move closer to the flames increases the risk. A stray spark can leap from the grate and land on your bedding. If you are deeply asleep, you might not smell the smoldering wool until it is too late. Then there is the matter of the portable heaters. If you are sleeping in a smaller chamber or a solar that does not have its own built-in fireplace, you might rely on a brazier. Picture a large metal bowl, often made of copper or iron, standing on 3 or 4 legs. Inside this bowl, servants have placed glowing coals taken from the main kitchen fire. This brazier is a wonderful invention because you can place it exactly where you need it. You can move it right next to your bed or place it under a table to keep your feet warm while you work. But the brazier is perhaps the most insidious fire hazard of all. Unlike the fireplace, which has a stone surround and a chimney, the brazier is open and unstable. If a dog knocks it over in the middle of the night, or if you kick it in your sleep, the red-hot coals will spill directly onto the dry rushes. Furthermore, the coals produce carbon monoxide. In a small, poorly ventilated room with the door shut tight against the cold, those fumes can be just as deadly as the flames. You might slip into a deep sleep from which you simply never wake up. The psychological toll of this constant threat is something you feel deeply as the night progresses. You are caught in a permanent trade-off. If you let the fire go out, the room will drop to a temperature that makes sleep impossible. The damp cold of the stone will settle into your bones and leave you vulnerable to illness. But if you keep the fire roaring, you must remain vigilant. This is why the role of the night watch is so vital in a castle. As you lie there, you might hear the heavy, measured footsteps of a guard passing by your door. Part of his job is to watch for the telltale glow of a fire out of control. He carries a lantern, but he is looking for a different kind of light. He is the barrier between the inhabitants of the castle and a catastrophe that could level the entire structure. The fear of fire was so great that it gave birth to one of the most famous medieval regulations, the curfew. The word itself comes from the French phrase couvre-feu, which literally means cover fire. When the evening bell rings, it is a signal for every household and every room in the castle to extinguish or cover their fires. In your chamber, this means using a metal lid, also called a curfew, to place over the embers. This lid has small holes to allow just enough oxygen to keep the coals glowing until morning without letting sparks escape. It is a communal pact. Everyone agrees to dampen their fires so that the entire community can sleep in relative safety. When you hear that bell, you feel a sense of shared responsibility. You cover your fire not just for your own life, but for the lives of everyone in the surrounding rooms. However, even with the curfew, accidents happen. You imagine the panic of a midnight fire in a stone tower. Castles are designed for defense against outside invaders, but they can easily become traps for those inside. The staircases are narrow and winding. The windows are often thin slits meant for archers, far too small for a person to squeeze through. If a fire starts on a lower floor, the heat and smoke will rise through the central stairwell like a chimney. If you are sleeping in the high chambers of the keep, you are cut off. There are no fire departments to call. There are no pressurized hoses. There is only a bucket brigade, a line of people passing leather buckets of water from the castle well or the moat. In the dark of winter, the water in those buckets might be partially frozen. The futility of fighting a large blaze with small buckets is a nightmare that haunts the back of your mind every time you stoke the hearth. As you drift toward sleep, you find yourself staring at the tapestries on the wall. They are thick and heavy, designed to stop the drafts that whistle through the gaps in the stonework. But you notice how they sway gently in the moving air. You see how close the edge of the fabric is to the stone mantle of the fireplace. You think about the tallow candles that were burning earlier. Tallow is rendered animal fat, and it is notoriously smoky and prone to dripping. A single candle left burning on a wooden chest could easily melt down and ignite the wood. You make a mental check of every light source you used before getting into bed. Are they all truly out? Is the curfew lid seated firmly over the embers? The sensory experience of this danger is all around you. You smell the dry, dusty scent of the rushes. You smell the sharp, acrid tang of the wood smoke that still lingers in the air. You hear the wind howling outside, pressing against the shutters, reminding you that the only thing standing between you and the lethal winter air is the very fire that could consume you. It is a delicate balance. You need the heat to live, but that same heat possesses the power to destroy everything you own. You realize that in the Middle Ages, warmth is never a passive experience. It is a constant negotiation with an unpredictable force. You adjust your blankets once more, tucking them tight around your chin. The orange glow of the hearth has faded to a deep, resonant crimson. The room is growing colder, but it is a safe cold. The fire is contained. The night watch is on his rounds. You have done everything you can to strike the balance between freezing and burning. As the last of the embers blink out, leaving you in a world of absolute velvety darkness, you finally allow yourself to succumb to exhaustion. You have managed the monster for another night. The castle remains standing, and you remain warm enough to survive until the first light of dawn. The threat of the fire remains, sleeping just as you are, waiting to be woken up again when the sun rises and the daily struggle for warmth begins anew. The transition from the deep, heavy unconsciousness of a medieval night to the first gray light of dawn is not a gentle one. You are currently buried under 4 layers of wool blankets and a massive quilt stuffed with goose down. On top of that, the weight of a heavy wolf skin or perhaps a thick bearskin pelt presses down on your chest, making every breath feel deliberate. For the last 8 hours, you have existed in a tiny, self-generated microclimate. The heat of your own body, trapped within the tight confines of the bed curtains, has kept you alive and relatively comfortable while the rest of the room has descended into a deep, biting freeze. But now, the sun is beginning to touch the high, narrow slits of the castle windows, and the reality of the morning is about to set in. Your first movement is cautious. You shift your head on the linen pillow, and immediately, A sliver of ice-cold air finds the gap between the blankets and your neck. Feels like a blade. You quickly pull the covers tighter, but the spell is broken. You are awake, and you are aware that outside this small, warm cocoon, the air in your bedchamber is cold enough to turn your breath into a thick cloud of white mist. In a modern home, you might reach for a thermostat. In a medieval castle, the thermostat is a young servant who is currently shivering just as much as you are. Before you even think about swinging your legs out of bed, the morning ritual begins with a sound. It is the rhythmic, metallic scrape of a small iron shovel against the stone hearth. Somewhere in the dim light of the room, a page or a chambermaid has entered silently. They are moving with practiced speed because they know that the faster they can get the fire going, the sooner the room will become habitable. You watch from the safety of your blankets as they clear away the gray ash from the previous night. They find the glowing heart of a single ember that was buried deep in the soot to stay alive. They feed it tiny slivers of dry kindling, blowing gently until a small orange flicker begins to dance against the soot-stained back of the fireplace. This is the first stage of thawing out. The smell of wood smoke begins to drift toward the bed, cutting through the stale, heavy scent of old wool and the lavender sachet tucked under your pillow. It is a comforting smell, but it is deceptive. The fire is small, and the stone walls of the castle are massive. Those walls have been absorbing the winter chill for months, and a few handfuls of burning oak will not change the ambient temperature of the room for hours. The air remains sharp and thin. Now comes the moment you have been dreading. You have to leave the bed. In the medieval world, the floor is your greatest enemy. Even if you are wealthy enough to have a wooden floor in your upper chamber, it is likely covered in a thick layer of rushes. These dried grasses were spread out to provide a small amount of insulation and to trap dirt, but by the end of winter, they are cold, brittle, and damp. If you are on a lower floor, you are stepping directly onto flagstones or tiles that have the temperature of an ice floe. You reach for your slippers, which have been sitting by the bed. They are made of thick felt or fur-lined leather, but they offer little comfort against the radiating chill of the ground. As you stand, the warmth of the bed evaporates instantly. The linen shift you wore to sleep is thin, and the air hits your skin like a physical blow. This is why the morning ritual of dressing is done with such frantic efficiency. You do not stand around contemplating your outfit. Your clothes have been sitting on a wooden peg or inside a heavy oak chest, and they are freezing to the touch. You grab your hosen, the long woolen leggings that must be tied to your linen drawers with small laces called points. Your fingers are already beginning to go numb, making the simple act of tying a knot a frustrating struggle. You fumble with the laces, your breath huffing out in short, frustrated bursts of steam. Next comes the tunic, followed by a heavy woolen gown or a surcoat. If the morning is particularly brutal, you reach for your pelisse, a garment lined with fur. For a noble, this might be soft ermine or squirrel. For a lesser knight or a merchant, it might be rabbit or sheepskin. The fur is not just a status symbol. It is a functional piece of survival gear. It traps a layer of air against your body, creating a secondary barrier that the room's drafts cannot easily penetrate. By the time you are fully dressed, you are wearing 3 or 4 layers of heavy fabric, and yet you can still feel the cold pressing against your back. With your body covered, you turn your attention to the most basic of morning necessities: washing. There is no running water and certainly no hot shower. On the washstand sits a pewter or ceramic basin and a pitcher of water. In the dead of winter, a thin crust of ice has formed over the surface of the water in the pitcher. You have to break it with your knuckles. The water is so cold it feels like it is burning your skin. You do not submerge yourself. Instead, you perform a perfunctory splash to the face and hands. You use a piece of rough linen to scrub your skin dry as quickly as possible. The friction helps bring the blood back to the surface, giving you a brief, stinging glow of warmth. The morning ritual is not just about physical warmth, however. It is also about preparing the senses. You move toward the window to pull back the heavy wool hangings. The sunlight that pours in is bright but provides no heat. Looking out over the castle bailey, you see the rest of the fortress waking up. Smoke is rising from a dozen different chimneys, from the great kitchen to the smaller fires in the barracks. You can hear the distant clatter of iron pots and the barking of hounds in the kennels. The castle is a machine of stone and wood, and it is slowly grinding into motion. You decide it is time to leave the relative isolation of your chamber. You open the heavy oak door and step into the corridor. If you thought your room was cold, the hallway is another world entirely. This is a space with no fireplace, a long stone tunnel designed for defense rather than comfort. The wind whistles through the arrow slits, creating a permanent draft that seems to hunt for any gap in your clothing. You walk quickly, your boots clicking on the stone, heading toward the Great Hall. The Great Hall is the heart of the castle's morning life. It is here that the true work of thawing out takes place. As you enter, you are greeted by the roar of the main hearth. This is not the polite little fire in your bedroom. This is a massive bonfire of thick logs that crackle and spit. The heat is intense, but localized. If you stand too close, your front will bake while your back remains frozen. You join a small crowd of other residents, knights, squires, and servants, all huddled near the flames. There is a communal sense of relief here. Everyone is performing the same dance, rubbing their hands together, stamping their feet, and waiting for the blood to start flowing properly in their extremities. Breakfast is served not on a table, but often as a simple, warm bowl of pottage or a thick slice of coarse bread toasted over the embers. The warmth of the food is just as important as the calories. You hold the bowl with both hands, using it as a heater for your palms before you even take a bite. The drink is usually small ale or perhaps a watered-down wine, often heated with spices if the Lord is feeling generous. That heat spreads through your chest, finally pushing away the last of the midnight chill that had settled into your bones. As you stand there in the flickering light of the great hall, surrounded by the smell of wood smoke, wet wool, and baking bread, you realize that the morning ritual of the medieval castle is a lesson in perspective. You have survived the night. The fortress, despite its icy stone and howling drafts, has done its job. It has kept the wind at bay and the wolves outside the walls. The process of thawing out is slow, and it is a struggle that you will have to repeat every single day until the spring thaw finally arrives. But for now, with the fire at your feet and a warm bowl in your hands, the frozen world outside seems just a little bit more manageable. You are ready to face the day, bolstered by the simple, hard-won triumph of having made it through another night in the heart of the winter stone.